Hi guys, this is Nina Means. I'm the director for Austin Community College Fashion Incubator, and we are here for Workshop Wednesdays. So if you've been following along with us, you'll know that we've actually been going through a variety of different stops along our product development cycle. So what we did was we gave you kind of an overview of what's involved in the product development life cycle. We kind of highlighted that with what kinds of samples you may see during that process, kind of in a traditional setting. But now we're kind of taking you through what all the different steps are throughout the process of developing the product. So there's a number of different things that people will do during this time, whether you're working for your own brand or if you're working for another company. But the product development process, for greater or lesser extents, has certain details that everyone will want to get across. And so we talked about concept, we talked about design, we talked about the prototyping samples. So now we're talking about how do we get to those things. So we're going to be integrating some knowledge that you've learned already with us from the technical design workshops previously. And if you haven't gotten a chance to see those videos, or if you've forgotten some of that content, feel free to go back and watch those videos to get caught up on the technical package. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over a little bit more with you about what's happening in product development. So let me start off with a quick recap. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so here we are. So what we did was, I'm going to move this up here so we can see each other. Wonderful. All right, so what we did was we reviewed the product development cycle. And what we did was we talked about concept, which I shared with you guys last week, was a bit of math plus your gut, right? There's the beauty and the aesthetics and the colors that are trending, the silhouettes that we're believing in for the season. But we also have to look at sales and liability and available materials and all of these things. Maybe it's also some of the qualitative data that we're learning from our audience that we really want to be able to incorporate at this time during the concept to make sure that we're providing what the customer is looking for. Or maybe we're looking at sales data across the board in terms of what kinds of categories are trending right now and why, about how we're living, what's happening with our customer, how have they changed. So all of those things are going to come into play here, and it's going to be so important for us to be able to capture those things. We talked about design and the sketch review meeting and what it takes for you to get your idea past that first hurdle. The very first time, your design director or your production team is looking at the sketches and says, that's possible or it's not possible at all. So we want to get you guys through that phase and make sure that you are in a viable space so that those designs are meeting the cost needs at the time, the design needs at the time, so that you're able to see your ideas take shape. So another thing that we talked about was the sketch review meeting and the things that happened during the sketch review meeting. And this is really where we're just looking at those initial digital sketches, or we're looking at those initial hand drawings, and we're deciding what things do we believe we should actually go into in design or not. And so those are, this is really kind of our first edit, so that we're not spending as much time and money on resources like sampling fabric. We call it yardage. So our sample yardage, or something that we would want to use for, or maybe it's labor. We don't want to spend all of our labor on the samples. We want to spend our labor when we're going into production. We have development labor regardless. There's salesman samples, there's prototyping and whatnot. But we want to cut down on that as much as we possibly can because it's so expensive at this stage. So what we want to do is to try to reduce how many times we have to see the sample in person. I've worked for some companies that have a really high, we call it a development ratio. And so they'll say, well, we want to sell 30 units, 30 different styles, not units, 30 different styles in this month's delivery. However, we need to develop 3 to 1 to make sure that we get the right 30 at the table. So that means that instead of, I'm not going to just design 30 styles if they want to get to 30 styles, I'm actually going to design 90 styles to get to 30 styles. That's 3 to 1. That's a huge deal. So there's some brands that I've worked for where that number has escalated and escalated and escalated because of indecision. And I've literally seen that number go up to 5 to 1. I've seen that number go up to 6 to 1, even 8 to 1. And if you want to talk to me about why fashion is where it is, I firmly believe it's mostly on, I don't know if it's mostly, it's a lot on product development. And there's a lot of opportunity in product development to be able to reduce our footprint there. So what we're really talking about here, one is please start using more technology. Gerber Technology has an incredible pattern design software system that allows you to actually do a lot of this kind of work digitally before you see anything in person. That cuts down on a lot of things up front. However, we're still learning all the process, and we want you to come along with us when we start to talk about how to save your costs and shave those things down in the future. You guys are going to love 3D pattern design software. You're going to love 2D pattern design software. It's going to change your life. So what we're going to talk about today, though, is the Tech Pass. So I talked to you about sketch review. Say we've got the batch of things that we want to discuss and design, and we say, okay, we are all agreeing that we're going to go into the first round of sampling with these 30 styles. That's a good number. We're going to go into these 30 styles. Before I get into that, I want to tell you that I have seen some other brands do this better than others, and it was the company I actually worked for just before I came to Texas. And that one, we developed almost one-to-one. I think we may only have dropped 2 or 3 styles every round, but 9 times out of 10, if they said they wanted 40 styles, they picked 40, out of the 40 that were presented. And so we didn't overdevelop in that space. That was one of the hallmarks of that brand. They were adamant about not overproducing, and it meant that the designers had to be much more precise in the creation of the product, which meant that the design metrics, the actual aesthetics, the fabric choices, everything had to be almost perfect the first time around. And as a designer, it put a lot more pressure on you, but man, when you got it, you really got it. And so it may take you a couple of deliveries to get the hang of working that tightly, but it saves so much to the environment. It saves so much work. It saves so much to the company. It's a savings all around. So the tighter you work, the better. So this Tech Pass is really where we start to characterize with our technical designer, or if you're in a smaller company, it may be just to yourself, where you are the judge and jury, you are the designer and the technical designer, which I've been many times, which a lot of designers have been many times, where you actually start to build your own product development tech pack for sampling. So if you're working with a sample room and you have your own sample room, you may be able to do a lot of this by communicating directly to your factory, directly to your sample room floor, and being able to kind of co-create and work with them as you go. However, you're still going to want a tech pack because no one wants anyone breathing down their neck. However, I've seen it happen. So the next thing that really happens during this process is typically the design team will go away with all the approved sketches and divvies up all the work. But if you again are an emerging designer, you have signed up to do 30 tech packs on your own if that's how large your collection is. Trust me, I've done it. It's possible. It's not impossible to do. 30 tech packs actually isn't that much. And you get a chance to, it's a lot of work, but you get faster the more you do it. So what we want to encourage you to do is to get practice, to get really comfortable with all the different ways that you talk about your product. And then what you do is you're actually going to go through and do everything that we discussed during the technical design layout. You're going to go through your callouts page. You're going to go through inspiration. You're going to make sure that people understand how the garment is supposed to fit. We give some language around that, how the garment should feel on the body. If it's got a little bit of ease, or if it's supposed to be semi-fitted, or if it's supposed to be, very relaxed. All of these are really great cues to the stitchers to know whether or not they got it right, because the last thing you want to do is to do all of this work and then for somehow to not get the attitude communicated through the style. So what do I mean by that? So sometimes whenever you go in, it's not just the raw execution of the stitches. The stitches are exceptionally important. However, what's also important is the attitude of the style. And you may get this whenever you kind of start looking at different brands. What I'll probably do is whenever we go through the first proto, I'm actually going to line up a few different images of what seems like the same style, maybe like a 2-button black blazer, or maybe a double-breasted coat. And we'll line up those images of what they look like and the attitude that's conveyed through the style. Now, this is literally the make or break gut check moment for a buyer. Am I or am I not going to commit to that style? And so I may have every stitch in place and every button in place and every, little nuance tag and detail done down to the T, as I've learned how to do in my Tech Pack class from ACC Fashion Incubator. I may have done every single one of those things absolutely correctly, but if I miss the attitude of the style in terms of the relaxed nature that should come across in where the shoulder hits, or maybe it's that it's not supposed to be relaxed at all and it's supposed to be very buttoned up and tight. If there's too much ease or too much, or if it's too relaxed in places where it's really supposed to offer a little bit more cinching. All of these things convey a mood. And so whenever you look at the product, either the mood is conveyed or it's not. And it really takes seconds for a buyer, a buyer for a store merchant, someone who's trying to fill their store with product. It also takes just a moment for a customer as a buyer to determine whether or not that product is really going to answer what it is that they're looking for. I'm sure you guys have all had this experience as well in the Tech Pass, in purchasing, but this is where in the Tech Pass this actually becomes important is, the very clear definition of the fabric. You guys, this is really where even in the sampling, the sampling of the fabric is going to help communicate that attitude that I'm talking about. So if you're wanting to have more of a easy, feeling, brand, and it's a little bit more laid back, but you've got this really starchy material, it's really kind of fighting against what it is that you're trying to communicate with the style. So even if every, measurement that you've requested is in place and it's correct, if it's the wrong material, your attitude is going to get misinterpreted and it may not get purchased. So similarly, as a designer, whenever you're sitting down to create your product, you're not going to just be able to have a beautiful sketch and a perfect tech pack. Now we're talking about perfect fabric selection and making sure that that fabric communicates what you're trying to say to your customer at that time. So right now, I think what we're all living and loving right now are sweatpants. We are living and loving sweatpants every day of the week, apparently, or some kind of softer pant, or maybe a less structured, garment, or something that gives us a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more stretchability. And so the fabrics that we're choosing to put our garments in, people are making decisions at, milliseconds based on how does it feel? Is it soft enough? How does it stretch? Is it, are these my stretchy pants that I can sit and eat whatever I'd like? Or that I can sit and be on a Zoom call for hours on end? How comfortable am I going to be? All of these decisions are made now. All of these decisions are made now. And so it's not just single needle top stitch. It's not just this size of button. It's not just the zipper tape just perfect. It's all of those things and so much more. And so the moment that we get this right, we typically don't go back and change that much, at least in my experience, from this point, if we're really going to go forward with the style. This typically makes or breaks whether the style goes forward is the correct fabric selection, the correct attitude. And, sometimes there may be some things that are just like, hey, we need to save this style. And so it may get another chance at a later stage to get re-imbued with the correct details, or if that product needs to work in that space at that price point, we may go back and redesign. However, this moment is crucial. This is the moment in product development that really kickstarts, really that first engagement with your sample room or your factory. Or, maybe you're stitching it up yourself, and this is really kind of saying, okay, are we really investing in this style going forward, or is this no, this is not happening. And so there's a lot of things that we'll learn from this phase, from this moment, to know whether or not this is how we're going to go forward. So, it's commitment, it's understanding how the fabric's going to behave, it's making sure that all the trim is communicating what you're trying to say correctly. It's the style of the garment, the attitude of the garment. I want to take some time to help you understand exactly what that looks like. What I don't want to do during this particular session is I don't want to go over every single page of the development tech pack, but what I will do is I'll explain to you a little bit of some of the differences of what you may see at the development phase as opposed to what you may see in the production phase. At this point, we're not going to be evaluating all of our sizes in this first tech pass. We're typically just going to be looking at our one sample size, because what we're going to want to do is just make sure that we got the style right to begin with. So before we start grading it and making different sizes, what we're going to want to do the first time around is we're just going to take our ideal middle size and focus on that. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to make sure that we get that one style just right. And then if we're saying, yes, this is a part of the collection, we should move forward with this, that's when we're going to start breaking out sizes. That's when we're going to start to put all the other energy and effort it takes to bring a style to market once we've cleared this prototyping phase. So this is really just a tech pack to get to the first prototype sample. If you're working by yourself, it's going to be tempting not to do this. And I'll tell you why you shouldn't skip it. If you are working by yourself and you just want to say, I just want to drape it and put it up there and get it done and then make a sample and then just kind of, I'll come back and tech pack it later. Guaranteed you'll forget. You'll have the sample there, maybe, if you haven't sent it out to help with creating the salesman sample or some version of. But trust me, the tech pass, even if it's to you, even if you are tech passing it to yourself, going from sketch to an actual tech pack will help you with the discipline to know exactly what you're about to get yourself into, what your utilization is going to be on the materials, how much that's going to cost you as a designer. It really helps you with disciplining your thoughts about what it's going to take to sell that product as opposed to just what you think is beautiful. And I think that as a designer going into business, you're going to have to, dial yourself back in a way that allows you to reassess what it is that you're doing and why. And so that's one of the reasons why the tech pack isn't just an exercise to communicate to the factory, it's also an exercise to communicate with yourself. And for a designer who, can be ruled by, the creativity and the aesthetics and the beauty of a garment, having to sit down and do these very technical components as well, I think really helps to anchor that design, that beauty that you've created into something that's attainable, that's shareable, and that's scalable. And as you guys are looking for ways to build your brand and create your brand, you'll want these records of the things that you've already done. So you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you go to do that same button down shirt with the extended shoulder. You've already got it. You've got all the development that you need. And so you're literally taking that first step and then you're going to be able to jump off of that from the future. So one of the things that we do is we really like to create a library of styles, and we'll categorize these by different, tops or bottoms or skirts or dresses or blazers or, outerwear. And we get a chance to keep all of those things categorized so that whenever it's time for us to go back to it and say, you know what, I really loved this particular style. Let's see what we can do to update it. All the specs are there. All of the bill of materials are already there. You already know what material you made it in before. So if there needs to be a little bit of an adjustment because one fabric has more stretch than another fabric, or you're deciding that you want to make it a little looser this time, or you're deciding that you want to add some really cool, updated, trendy details, you've already got a base to start from. So we strongly encourage you to find ways to keep yourself organized so that as you're moving forward, that this is this isn't just something where you like make and toss, make and toss. I've worked with brands where it's that way. I've worked with brands where we've tossed way more things than we ever should have. And it's for the designer, it's a bit demoralizing because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and a lot of time that was given that just gets kind of discarded. But what we want to do is to be very intentional with this kind of space to make sure that you're getting what you need to get from the factory, from yourself. The clearer you're able to communicate at this time, the better. So what I want to do is actually, I want to remind you guys of some other things that kind of come across during this tech pack, the development tech pack. We had talked a little bit about some of the samples previously, so I'm going to actually go back to one of those slides because what we are working on right now is just getting up to this first prototype or proto sample. So we're really at just the very, very, very beginning. And it's really that tech pack, that first development tech pack that's standing between us and the prototyping sample. It is also the same first tech pack that's standing between us and the salesman sample, but we will typically have a moment to review what happens with the prototype before we decide if that's what we're going to move forward with for the salesman or the photo sample. So if you're doing photo shoots on Instagram or on your website or for the specialty store that just purchased your goods, all of those, it'll have to go through a bit of a vetting process to make sure that that particular sample is what you're actually going to deliver. So your salesman, this is another crucial step, guys. The salesman and the photo sample need to match what you actually produce. And sometimes that's really hard to do because maybe a material is no longer available or you bought dead stock and you used it all. That happens. If you're not familiar with what dead stock is, guys, that's really where you're buying the tail end of materials that are no longer produced. And so it's dead and it's dead stock. So there's like, once it's gone, it's gone. No one's coming back to help you make more of it. So that's really important to know whether or not you are working with that material and if there's enough for you to get through all of your sampling plus your production. This is really, really key. I've got stuck on this before myself, and it's really difficult trying to explain to your buyer, why the salesman sample and what they actually got in store looks and feels different. It's not a good conversation to have. So what we want to do is to kind of have you thinking about all of that up front, which is why you need to do that tech pack. So you know exactly how much material you need before you get started. Because guaranteed, you will get to the end and you'll get set if you don't know what you're working with up front. Or you'll find that you sampled too many times, getting to where you are trying to go. And you know what? You're like, I probably didn't need to resample to see an extra ½ inch on the leg opening. Or maybe I did, but I needed to be able to know what the cost would be for sampling that and then running the size set again. So, we talked about size set, we talked about these things. If you're not sure what those phrases are or what that means, go back and check out our videos. We'd love to kind of share with you, a bit more about those, but we did go over that in our sampling lecture, in our sampling talk. So feel free to go back and kind of refresh yourself on what those things mean. There's a lot of jargon in our business, and so we're trying our best to unpack all of that here for you. Kind of going back to some of the other images that I shared with you guys the last time. Actually, I'm going to go back to our original slide here. So again, I just want to kind of start to wrap up here. We've got just a few more minutes before we're having to kind of close out, but essentially, guys, what we really want to get across here is that the tech pack is really going to be your window into your first prototyping sample. We've gone over quite a lot of it already. Just kind of in recap, we want to, just remind you that this is really an opportunity for you to communicate not just the components that are needed, but the attitude of the style. The first time everyone's seeing that style, the first time you're seeing that style, and where those decisions are being made about whether or not this product is going to be able to go forward. We talked about how key the fabric selection is at this point, and being able to plan for the future. We also talked about the discipline that doing the tech pack at this phase is if you're working for yourself. So typically I've seen a lot of brands just kind of jump in and make a lot of samples and have no clue what any of those styles do are, what goes into it, and then they're kind of backtracking, trying to figure it all out. Trust me, you want to do the discipline up front. You really want to take the time to think through what's going to be required in order to bring this product to market before you start cutting on your fabric. Because if you can't reproduce it, it's not saleable. So that's why we really want to, encourage you guys that as creatives, and those who love to make, we really want you to make. We want to make really want you to make beautiful, beautiful things, but we want you to make beautiful, beautiful things that you can share with the world. And so one of the ways that we do that is to really focus in the development phase on the tech pack. So take your time, do the tech pack, review all your sketches, commit to your ideas. It's really hard to do. I know you're like, I love them all. They're like my children, I've heard people say this. I too get very connected to all of my designs because I think they're all beautiful in their own way. But there's only some that people will actually want to purchase. So just know that just because you love them all doesn't mean that your customer will love them all. So we just kind of have to be a bit honest with ourselves about what's going to move, right? So we're looking for a product that's going to be appropriate for your customer, that we're going to actually invest the time in to create a tech pack. So that's where we are. Next week, we're going to talk a bit more about the first proto, but I'm going to give you guys a side-by-side on what those prototypes look like whenever the attitude and fabrics are different. So this is where a lot of our selections come in, that are now communicating something very different than just getting through the tech pack. So guys, thanks so much just for your time here today. We are really excited that we were able to communicate what we've learned here, what I've learned working in the industry, getting a chance to teach at the collegiate level, and getting a chance to support designers as they launch their brands. So we're really excited getting started here in just a little bit for Design in Residence program. And you guys should really check out some of the things that are coming out here in the next few months. So again, thank you so much. Again, my name is Nina Means. I'm the director for Austin Community College Fashion Incubator, and you've been watching Workshop Wednesdays.